folks there who are presumptively innocent, who are not convicted of anything, they're awaiting trial, most of which are there because they can't afford bail. Around 14,000 people a year are sent to Rikers on bails $1,000 or less that they can't afford. One of these handouts in the front gives a lot of different stats that sort of harp on this same idea, right? That people are having across the city are being arrested, having bail set, and can't afford it, so are having to spend time on Rikers Island. This issue, became especially relevant here in the city, I think, with the death of Khalif Browder, right? That folks probably know about. So our intervention in this is to pay bail. To go back a little bit, we've been around for now 3 years. We started in Brooklyn, which is hence our name, paying for folks that were referred to us through the Brooklyn Defender Services. We were born out of a public defender agency. We were created after a law passed in New York State that said that nonprofits, charities, can exist that pay bail for folks that can't afford it without charging any sort of fee. But you can do that, you have to be licensed, and you can only pay for misdemeanor cases where the cash bail amount is $2,000 or less. So that means that we're restricted to only paying for misdemeanor cases $2,000 or less. And that's a very unique thing to New York, and it has a lot to do with the for-profit bail bond industry here, why that law came into place. They weren't happy with nonprofits paying for free for folks. We can have another conversation about that at the end when we talk about advocacy. So we started in Brooklyn.
I'm sorry. So a 501(c) can pay bail, or you have to have a separate 501?
Yeah, you 501(c)(3). Then you just have to get licensed by the Department of Financial Services as a charitable bail bond organization.
So is the potentially incarcerated person obligated to repay you?
No, right. So we pay, no one has to pay us back. We get the money back from the city once folks come back to their court dates.
So I think it's great.
Yeah.
But I'm still thinking, so why should I show up then if I'm not on the hook for the $2,000?
People want to make their court dates because they want to get their cases done. If they don't, a warrant's issued by the city, and then they can get arrested by the police. So most people actually...
right, but I mean that's incentive to me to show up regardless of whether there's a bail paid or not.
And
I think it's great, but I'm just thinking, wow, okay.
No, it's a great point, because I think that's actually the power of what our organization can show, is that 95% of our clients make all of their scheduled court dates with no financial incentive. So it shows that people want to make their court dates. Exactly. What's the point?
It's just like a charade.
Yeah. So we started paying bail in Brooklyn. Now we pay in Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Staten Island. We're the largest bail fund in the country. We pay for between 100 and 125 folks a month. I think 2 weeks ago, we paid for our 3,000th person. So we paid bail for 3,000 people. I have bail payers in arraignment courts in Brooklyn and Manhattan every day, which means that when folks are brought to see the judge for the first time and bail is set, we're there to pay right before they get sent to Rikers. We also pay once folks are on Rikers too, but we try to prevent anyone from having to go there. Yeah.
How do you identify who you are going to pay bail for, and what's that process?
Yeah, thanks. So we work super closely with all the public defender agencies in Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Staten Island. So as soon as a public defender gets a case where it falls into the misdemeanor $2,000 or less, they send us an email and we're ready to pay. We also take referrals from the community, which is why I'm really excited to be talking to all of you. In case, every public defender knows about us, but that doesn't mean we get every single referral. And so we have, an online referral form where folks can write us and be like, my loved one's on Rikers. Even if we can't help because it's not a misdemeanor, or it's more than we can pay, we can help folks in navigating the process. That's actually what these booklets are that we passed around. We worked on creating these because the bail payment process is so confusing and also can be really exploitive if you have to go to a for-profit bail bond industry. And so these are like know your rights booklets for folks that we created too. So I said, we've been around for 3 years. We pay a lot of bail. 95% of our clients make all of their scheduled court dates, showing that bail is really unnecessary. Our clients also, as we've worked with folks, they're 2 to 3 times more likely to have their cases either dismissed or end favorably, right? So no criminal disposition, right? Which shows also, if you go to our website, we have all these stats, right? That bail is really coercive, right? It's a tool that prosecutors use to get folks to plead guilty, because if you think you're going to end up on Rikers Island, you'd rather take a guilty plea to get out right then, right? And so, 90% of folks plead guilty when bail is going to get set or when they're being held in on bail, versus 40% of folks who are out and free to fight their case from a position of freedom. And that's what we've seen with our cases too, right?
Sounds wonderful. Do you have a challenge with the demand that you have?
Yeah.
Are there more people?
More people than we can pay for.
People?
Yeah. So, turning away, we try to pay for every single referral that we get. It's a funding issue. We're now at a place where we have more funds, where we are more, where that's easier for us to do. A lot of times the reasons why we end up not paying for people is because of like operational or logistical reasons. It's hard to pay bail in this city, actually. It takes like around 6 hours from like start to end, because you have to go to the bail window and then they fax paperwork over to the jail, and then the paperwork gets faxed back. Sometimes in that process, or in the process of getting connected to someone to speak to them before we pay, we talk to everyone before we pay their bail to make sure they consent to it and they know who we are. A family member will pay, or they'll get released at their next court date. Something will happen. So those are really the only reasons why we haven't paid. In the past, we used to have to pay a lot more attention to, like, do we make sure we have phone numbers for a lot of contacts, because we do reminders. Now we're at the place where we're really trying to pay for everyone that we can.
Rachel, it seems like you have a script, but I'm going to jump to a question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Where's your funding?
Also, all privately funded. We don't take city or state funding, mostly just because cities also paying the folks that set the bail, and so we want to be able to, not use the same funds that are going into the system to sort of get folks out. So yeah, 70% is grant funded, and then 30% individuals.
So and it sounds like you have, in addition to like just setting the bail to get that defendant home, that there's an advocacy component to your work. Do you ever speak to the bench and say, look, if 95% are showing up under 2,000, and we have this mechanism that we put in place, we post bail, defendant is released, they come back 95% of the time. Do you ever ask, why do you set bail at all for under 2,000?
Yeah. I mean, so in the beginning, and even still now, we try to be somewhat under the radar when we're in the courtroom, only because of this fear that, a lot of public defenders had, that if judges knew we were there, it might change the way they decided to set bail, right? That maybe they'd either use us as a cover, like set it purposely so that because they know we were going to pay, or set it like at $2,500, just so that they knew that we weren't going to. So but we have had many conversations with judges, and there's still a lot of disbelief. And then there's also just like the cultural sort of norms around, I think, a societal thing. This is a question for all of us, of that, the fact that like a judge is much more likely to end up on the front page of the Post if someone gets their bail paid or released and they hurt someone and be condemned, and than they are to be like celebrated for releasing folks. And I think there's that fear of always ending up on the front page of the Post. That really still is a big driver of culture in the courtroom.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And the percentage that plead case because they don't want to have to deal with bail, do you know what percentage really are guilty or not guilty?
No. It's hard to tell, because I think, a lot of folks that
They're just scared and they plead.
Right, yeah, and people take pleas, whether or not their case is strong or they actually did it, just because, the way that our system churns people out right now. I think it's like, less than 10% of cases go to trial, less than 5%.
Wow.
So, yeah, the numbers are really, yeah.
What percentage of crimes committed or accused of being committed do you find that partake of your program?
Well,
so do you have like people that are just, say, loitering or B&E or what have you, or
So
drug offenses, alcoholism?
Right, so all of those, we pay, any misdemeanor case we pay for, which ranges, it does range from really low-level assault cases, like throwing someone's self, misdemeanor, to, turnstile jumps, that's still, okay, we still are paying bail, people jumping in turnstile, just to be clear. And yeah, like loitering in the street.
Do you have those
sleeping.
stats by chance?
I don't have them right now, we have them at our office for
Okay.
sure, yeah.
I think it's a good program, very meritorious. And I guess you wouldn't have to worry on the lower level, but I could see something like this if it takes root and it's successful, and it would be very helpful. You probably want to expand that. And, you know, you made a good point of a judge being concerned about, you know, what happens when things happen, because
Right.
things do happen. So I think that, you know, it's early stages, but some consideration should be given to who takes ownership of the cases when somebody is out and does cause harm, because that's a legitimate concern, public safety concern,
Of course, yeah.
even for neutral people. Less on the lower level, but if this was ever to be very successful and go into higher level cases, who would the agency funding it be liable?
Right.
Should they take some kind of liability? Again, just more for the worst cases.
Yeah, and I think something to like think about there, right, is that money bail is, you know, for people that have funds, even if they are quote unquote dangerous or might hurt someone, they still get to be released. And I think that's our primary thing, is that two people accused of the same crime, one person with money, one person without, is still going to go free. So if we do actually really care about safety, those are conversations we should have, but they should be outside of a wealth-based system that sort of privileges folks with means. Yeah, but it's a fair question. I mean,
You made the point that 80 to 90% of Rikers residents are there because of inability to pay bail.
they're there. So 80% is their pre-trial, so haven't been convicted of
Yes.
anything. Around it's a fraction of that are there because they can't afford. Some are there because they have holds or they're remanded.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you said you are advocating to eliminate bail completely. I'm just curious if you've done any research on the cost of keeping people who are unable to pay bail on the larger like government infrastructure, like the jail cost and all those other costs that would be associated.
Yeah, it's in the millions, right? It's around $400 a day per person to keep them on Rikers, right?
So on a community board level, how can we help you?
Yes, awesome. So the second component of what we do, right, we pay bail for folks, but then we came out of public defender agencies that also had this idea around like holistic defense, right? So after we paid bail, we were paying bail for lots of folks who were homeless, who had lost access to their benefits or lost their bed in the shelter or lost their job because they were incarcerated on Rikers, right? So we built into our work this client services component, which means that we work with clients who are interested, right? Nothing is mandatory, everything's based on what clients ask for, to connect them to resources and social service providers, right? Not recreating any wheels, but we've built a lot of relationships with folks who assist with housing and employment benefits to make those connections and provide those pathways. That includes like assistance in folks returning to their court dates, because we also do reminders for every single person, phone, text, and then like we'll pay for cabs, we'll pay for transportation. We really want to give people the support they need to make their court dates, and hopefully also to better their situations once they're out. So that's a big part of what we do too. And then we have this advocacy campaigns component of our work, because all of our direct services are really rooted in this idea that we're trying to make systemic change. We don't think bail funds are the solution to the bail problem, right? We know that bigger change is possible and necessary, but we see ourselves like as this very necessary intervention until that happens. And we do all of our work in coalition with, base building grassroots orgs as well as advocacy orgs. So I don't know if folks have heard of the Free New York campaign, which is sort of led by Just Leadership USA, but it's around the legislative side of this. So how do we create laws or push forward laws that are actually going to get rid of money bail? And that's happening right now. As we know, we're in the legislative season. Remains to be seen whether or not actually anything will happen, but we're in coalition there, giving our input, sharing what we know to help inform those discussions. We've also started a bail bond accountability campaign, which is around the commercial bail bond industry. So with other organizations working to on a city council level, on a legislative level, on other sorts of governance groups like Department of Financial Services, looking to increase the regulation of the commercial bail bond industry. We produced a report that shows that they take around $22 million from our most marginalized communities, the for-profit bail bond industry, every year. Just so much money that's coming out of really the poorest communities across the city. And then we just recently launched a Court Watch program, which is a volunteer community-led project that puts New Yorkers into the courtroom to monitor court shifts, to make sure that specifically our DAs are doing sort of the progressive things that they say they want to do. So for instance, they said they'd stop requesting bail on misdemeanors. This is in Manhattan and Brooklyn specifically. Requesting bail on certain misdemeanors. They recently, I don't know if folks saw this a couple of days ago, Cy Vance just said, he's going to stop prosecuting marijuana possession, right? And so our Court Watch, we train folks to Court Watch, put folks in the courtroom to sort of report on whether or not these things are actually happening. And that's something that we're really looking to build a cross-city movement. Trained over 300 people now, but would love to do for more people to get involved. So if your communities are interested, or any of you, that's a great way to sort of plug into this work. And then nationally, as we were just talking about, we also incubate other projects. So one of them was the National Mama's Bailout Day. I don't know if folks saw this, for Mother's Day, bailing out Black mothers across the country. And so we are the fiscal sponsors for that project. It's led by Black groups across the country, grassroots folks. But we were able to provide some of the infrastructure for that to happen, because there was a lot of folks across the country that was really resonated with, so lots of donations, which meant lots of people were free, raised the issue, and so that's another sort of an example of a campaign we're involved in. To return to your question in terms of involvement, these are campaigns that we would love folks to plug into. In terms of referrals to our organization to pay, we want to pay bail. So we have on our website there's a referral form for where those referrals can come to. And then if folks know of Manhattan-based social service agencies that maybe we're not in partnership with, that could be of assistance to folks who are looking for assistance with housing, employment, things like that. That would be great too, because we're always looking to build those relationships.
I have a question. Do you have any information about the differences between people who are able to have bail and those who are in Rikers who have bail, and they're in future paths, or what happens to them after, if they do plea and then after that time?
Yeah, so no, I don't have, in terms of post-case stuff, and life outcomes, we haven't done any specific research on that, although it would be interesting. I do have information on case dispositions on the impact, but other than that, it would be an interesting longitudinal.
What is the impact on case disposition?
So you're is 90% more you're likely to plead guilty if you're held in on bail versus only 40% if you're out. Yeah, so your case dispositions are.
What about going to trial? Is there any impact on the results of trial if you're able to be not in a jail setting prior to the trial?
Yeah, well, I would, just based on what I know, I would assume it's better. I don't have that specific stat though. That would be interesting. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the volunteer program that I guess this is where we may be able to be of help in disseminating this information to community board members and others?
Yes.
In terms of time commitment, involvement?
Awesome. So two big ways. So on this sheet we have some get involved stuff. Court Watch is definitely a place where it's going to be this is about increasing transparency and accountability for the criminal legal system in New York. And so it's about putting New Yorkers into the courtroom because they're allowed to be there, right? And that if we elect our DAs, we should also be able to make sure they're doing what we want them to do. and also just to have sort of a more democratic participation in the system. And so that's something that would be great to get folks involved in. We do trainings once a month. They host them. We're usually doing them at NYU, but and right now the court watching is just in Brooklyn and Manhattan, but we're also going to be expanding to Queens and the Bronx. So that's a huge thing. Have folks sign up, go to the Court Watch website, sign up for the mailing list. And then in terms of with the bail fund, we also do volunteer projects on a somewhat of a smaller scale, but we have volunteers come in every month to make care packages for our clients who are bailing out of the jail right away, who often need like some immediate food, toiletry sort of things right when they're getting bailed out. So, but that you can find on our website too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have in this office, the Board President's office, a Rikers task force, since, the move is to shut down Rikers.
Right.
And, so we're looking at both the sort of facility here in Manhattan and what's going to happen, but also the whole issue of reducing the population of Rikers. So we had a lengthy sort of presentation and conversation at our last meeting about supervised release.
Got it.
And it's sort of similar to a lot of the things you're saying in terms of at arraignment, nonprofit groups can say, okay, listen, don't set bail, we're going to be responsible, we're going to do the supervised release program. And also similar numbers to what you have, 95% of the people in supervised release actually do show up, for their child. So my question, I guess, is how your two programs work together. Do you work with the nonprofits that do supervised release, or are you working with the DAs in terms of what, because they've, their numbers are going up too. They have, they're sort of expanding the pool of who's eligible for supervised release. So I just am wondering how that relates to efforts to pay bail of folks that aren't in that program.
Yeah. So I think supervised release, we are in close contact with oftentimes sometimes they'll have been the program that worked with someone in the past, and then we pay the bail when someone else is, if they're rearrested. We're in very close communication with them, and sometimes are accessing the services that they also provide to folks. I think the difference with supervised release, right, is that it's a mandatory sort of court-issued. We see ourselves as, we know that we're somewhat working in the system, but we see ourselves as an outside sort of disruption, whereas supervised release is, it's a part of the city, yeah. And I think the only concern we have with supervised release is net widening. What does that mean? Would the people that are now having to do check-ins with a city agency could have been folks that would have been released on their own recognizance in the past? And so obviously any effort that's not going to end up with someone in a cage is good, but also I think we should all be cognizant of what it means to have supervision of folks in their own communities too, is not necessarily hopefully what we're going for, especially in these very low-level cases, which is what supervised release currently works with. If they were able to expand to cases where folks are being currently remanded, or it might be a different. So it's sort of a tension point. Yeah.
I see a request to support S8146, the
Yeah.
Bail Bond Accountability Campaign. And looking it up real quickly, I see that the bill's sponsor is somebody we may remember well, Brian Benjamin. So yeah, CBs evidently can lead to stuff.
I should have. Yeah, that's so funny.
And co-sponsors are Alcantara and Hoylman. So maybe we could, for those who have state senators in our district, maybe that's a way that community board can advocate.
That's
for
awesome.
Social services.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, and that's about eliminating the bail bond industry, and this report that we've released. There's a lot been come out recently about the bail bond industry. New York Times released a really good article. Comptroller Stringer released a report calling for the elimination of the bail bond industry because of how much money they suck from communities. So those resources are of interest. Can send them along too.
Please.
Yeah.
So your answer to the funding was that you accept private funds, right? Do you accept government funds in any form? Because a couple of months ago we had a presentation from the DA's office, Manhattan DA's office, regarding civil forfeitures and the money. And it was a sizable amount of money that they were putting into reentry programs. But I have to say I wasn't very impressed with their position on bail reform and this bail fund. And at that point,
they said we're working on it.
Right, we're working on it, but I wasn't. I have to admit, I didn't know your agency existed at that point.
Yeah, it's okay.
If you accept any kind of funding, I would, make sure, let us know, and we would certainly advocate that, they came here and said, look, we have this money, how can we help?
Yeah.
And they should be held to that sort of like promise.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see that money go into your agency.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. We've had different sort of iterations of this conversation before, and it's somewhat of our like where we accept money from. I could think of maybe some places where that might make a lot of sense for those funds to get reinvested. I think with us, it's like, yeah, because we are like in this position of holding VAs accountable, what it would mean to take money could put us in a precarious spot.
Like if you used it not for bail, but for something else.
Yeah, I wonder, it's a great question.
And then
it's
a lot of this money is forfeitured assets.
Right, so, right.
So that in itself.
I wonder, like, is there ways for them just to give that money back straight to the communities?
There's a whole lot more they can do with it than
Yeah.
basketball programs on Saturday are great.
Yeah.
But you're really trying to fix broken people at that point. Where we can try not to break them to begin with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's not to be mean to their program. I think
No.
they're trying to use a very specific framework to reintroduce money back into communities using nonprofits that have a very established record of doing work within communities. But I think the big question that did come up was about bail and why couldn't you use a portion of this funding towards freeing people.
Right.
And so that was the piece for them that I think, they're still trying to work through what that method looks like. But this is a much more sort of direct and focused mission that you all have.
Cool. Yeah, that's really...
Hi,
Hey,
good morning.
Pepper.
Hi, Rachel. How are you doing?
Good.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and for the presentation. I think it's wonderful information. We've been in contact with Rachel, trying to get a little better idea of how we might be able to support. So I'm so thankful for the Borough President's Office and being able to extend it. One of the so just on Tuesday we had a round table and we have a strategic committee meeting where this is something that we've taken up, and which is why we've been engaging a few and the Borough President's Office as well around a few things. So one of the participants of the round table was actually Soul Saving Station, which is a church and a recipient of the funds from the DA's office. And a lot of the stuff that they're doing in terms of working with youth, developing programs, and it's true to some extent that a lot of the money is not necessarily going as we may think to some of the best places, but there are a few good programs that have received the money and are doing and are looking to work especially with the community, and we are engaging with them. I know one of the things you indicated was being able to get connected with some of the, because one of the big things we are thinking of is if anyone receives bail, are they just going to go home and sit and relax or whatever, or are they going to be trying to, be made aware of the situation, some of the things that kind of brought them to that situation and how they can address that, workforce development, education, whatever it may be. And so we are looking to be able to develop either to partner with organizations that are already doing this, or support some in a certain capacity. One of the things that and I think we've spoken about it a little bit, is to try and have a liaison at the community board to be able to say, yes, we have identified 4 or 5 different individuals who may be a good candidate for this. We are going to be to some extent develop something of a criteria, so that we say, okay, based on meeting less than 2,000, misdemeanor, other things that in conversation with you may agree to, we say yes, these are 6 or 7 different candidates that we think may be good to pass on. We were initially looking at some point to be able to start up a bill fund of our own, but I think it's redundant if there's some sort of an existing and a successful program. And some of the partners you mentioned that you're working with, I think is fantastic, just leadership and others that I have been able to interact with. So I appreciate the question that came out, what can community boards do? I definitely think us being able to have a liaison in their support. Yes, one of our organizations within CB9 is a recipient of funding from Columbia, and we're supposed to provide a significant amount of wraparound services and support wraparound services. So we want to make that connection with you as well. One of the questions I do have, and you may or may not have this information, is just in reference to the folks that are recipients of the funding from you, do you have a breakdown in terms of what percentage is coming from Manhattan and what percentage is coming from Brooklyn? And whether or not, just because you're based in Brooklyn, it may be a little bit heavier, and how we may be able to support being able to get more folks that are needy, that meet the criteria, being able to get, to you.
It's actually quite, like, I mean, I think it's maybe 50% Brooklyn, 10% Staten Island, 40% Manhattan. So it's still pretty even, and that's just because we work so closely with the public defenders who, at that moment can make the referrals. But I think like the more awareness, right? Like people should know that we're around, and our name is deceiving, but like should know that like we pay bail in Manhattan. So I think spreading the word about us and knowing that community members can feel empowered to reach out is important. I think also like something, Padma and I have talked about is like we're restricted, right? Misdemeanors, $2,000 or less. Obviously folks get bail set outside of those parameters all the time, and that community members or groups that are raising funds should also feel empowered to pay bail for people. I'll say like you can't pay more than $2 a month otherwise you'll violate insurance law. That's when you have to get licensed. But like groups can pay for like up to 2 bails a month for bails more than misdemeanors and more than $2,000.
And you have a liaison. We have the 30th Street Men's Shelter in our community, and
Great.
So 1,000 men in the shelter. And is there a liaison there? I'm sure they must be aware of this program. But
Yeah. So we're always frequently in contact with them. I don't know if you have a person that's.
We do, yes.
Yeah,
okay.
That'd be great because
Okay,
I think like we kind of call like the main number,
Yeah.
and that's a different person each time.
Okay, good. We do definitely.
That'd be great.
Connect you.
Yeah, thank you.
The community board is putting on a forum in the beginning of June on reintroducing formerly incarcerated people back into the community, and it might be useful to have some of these. Would you be able to provide?
Yes, thank you so much for saying that. I have thousands of these booklets. If you have community centers, churches, events, things like that you want them,
you can literally mail everything here.
Okay, great.
And we can send out
Thank
to
you.
everyone.
That's great. So maybe we'll follow up with what.
And we also do street fairs during the summer,
Yes.
so this would be great for people's street fair
That's
tables.
awesome.
That and these, because it has
Absolutely.
To get involved, yeah, okay, yeah, great. Let's follow, yeah.
Yes.
Cool, thanks.
Are there any other questions?
Just one last demographic question. I'm going to assume most of the people that are who are part of this program are young, on the younger side, but I know that there's a growing older adult homeless population, as well as opiate addiction and some others, or like limited incomes, things that happen where their supportive services aren't around. Are you seeing any of those cases? Are you guys, and is there any sort of spikes or increases or changes in that?
I mean, I can talk anecdotally. I mean, I can talk demographics, right? 90% of people we pay for are Black and brown. They come from all the same community, particular communities in Brooklyn, Manhattan, and across the city. But in terms of like what you're naming to around like opiate, something, and when I primarily paid bail, which was for a long time when it was just me and the executive director for a long time. The folks I spoke to, I heard this story so many times that they worked in construction, something happened to them, they fell, they got hurt, and now they're addicted to opiates. That was something that a couple of years ago, I was like almost at least 2-3 times a week I was hearing from folks. So I don't have specific numbers, but it is a real trend. Across demographics too.
Yes.
Would you be willing to come and present next month to our Health and Human Services Committee or to full board?
Sure, yeah. And if folks have interest in bringing someone from an organization to communities, whether for events or community boards, we can definitely make it happen, whether it's me or any of my Rockstar staff. They'll pairs themselves, people can talk about their experience.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right,
Cool,
Rachel, thank you.
Got my contact information, so pass that along. Happy to.
I actually, Rachel sent to us the handout, so I can forward it to all the chairs after we're finished, and then we will communicate about getting a huge dump of booklets And then we're gonna have about 100 interns this summer, so.
Oh,
Yeah, yes. So, you know, this will be one of the things that they can do to help deliver stuff to your offices and stuff, so.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
And happy to send more stuff on, like specifically Court Watch, other ways for folks to get involved.
Yeah, I think if you have a handout on some of the stats stuff that folks were asking about, like percentage of crimes, that I think that would be helpful too.
When you heard that noise, I was on your website, so there's a lot of material. All the programs you talked about, are they listed on the website?
Yeah, in different, we're redoing our website. But yep. And most of it's because they're also new and in coalition with groups, but I can send along.
That would be helpful.
Yeah,
wonderful.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Community Board 9, and special shout out to Diana Howard from our office who connected us with Brooklyn Bail Fund. So thank you. So just to move forward with the Borough President, or the Borough President's report, just so you all know, new members, they've been starting. I have a couple more boards that I have been trying to get letters out to. I have not forgotten you. You're right there.
What will the effective date be when you finish it up?
So the effective date is actually April 30th.
April 30th.
That's on everyone's appointment letter.
Okay.
And, you know, I've also gotten a couple questions from folks, particularly some of our young people. I think some of, you know, if young persons that are going off to college indicated that they are not going to be with us in the fall, we did replace them with new members because we just had an opportunity to do that. It means though that they can't vote. So what we don't want is to have too many members voting. And so I've been sort of telling people, just sort of use this month to wrap things up. So you can use this month to, you know, finish out committee stuff, transferring stuff over to other people. And this particularly is just sort of for my high school folks. So, you know, just to keep aware, because I know CB8 had some questions. I know some other boards have hit me up to ask sort of about that.
We have one high school, he's graduating, but he's staying here for college.
That's fine.
Give him.
That's fine. He needs nothing.
Fine.
This is really just for people who applied and said, you know, I'm going off to college, but you know, and you know, some really amazing folks. But I have to say, I'm really happy with the crop of new folks that we've appointed. As you know, this process for me usually starts in like August, September, October, and so it always does my heart a lot of good to see the new crop of people. Folks seem really excited to participate. We really just had a really great crop of applicants this year. I do also have a waiting list. So that waiting list is something that I sort of keep on handy. And so if it's a borough president appointment, I just sort of automatically can reach to the waiting list and pick a person. If it is with a council person, typically I will give them suggestions, but it's up to them. And usually it takes them a little bit of time to sort of go back through applications and stuff. June 19th is our reception, our Juneteenth, that's right, our celebration at the Museum of Natural History in the Whale Room, which will be fun. It was fun a couple years ago when we did it. Yeah. You know, this also takes the place of a training. So this year we're looking to do a little bit more around our charter revision. And I think, you know, as I've been going out to community boards since one of my liaisons left, I've been just telling people, you know, our charter revision is really going to be more inclusive of community boards, because we know that a lot of what governs you all really does affect community board members. And so while, you know, the mayor has his sort of thing going on, we also will be doing our own process, which I think will be a lot more inclusive. Gail did also testify at the Mayor's Charter Revision Commission. So again, we're keeping plugged into things, but we're really proud about our own sort of initiative alongside Public Advocate James and others. I heard you loud and clear at our last Borough Board meeting. We will be starting our L-Train Task Force next Thursday, May 24th at 10 a.m. And so I've already reached out to all of the impacted boards as well as the transportation chairs. the idea around this will be, it's going to be sort of more short term because things are moving very quickly from the MTA and DOT standpoint. And so we don't want this task force to drag on and on, but I think what we really heard from people was that boards really wanted to make sure that they weren't stepping on each other's toes, that the resolutions and that the work that they're doing around this L train shutdown was not going to have adverse impacts on other community boards. So we heard you, and I really appreciate everyone's suggestions. So, you know, to start next Thursday, it's just going to start with the community boards. I think it's really important for the boards to hear each other. And then subsequently over the summer, we will be meeting and then sort of inviting additional stakeholders. So we'll have folks from, let's say, the 14th Street Coalition. We will also have representatives from a lot of the bids and other stakeholder organizations outside of the community board that have also wanted to have a more inclusive process. So we will be inviting them in. So if you have any suggestions or, you know, things that, you know, particularly for my boards 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, please send me stuff. You know, I'm starting to put together the draft sort of agendas looking forward, and so if there are particular topics that you would like for us to cover, please let us know. We would like to really use this task force prudently. So I'm excited about that. Our Rikers Task Force met earlier this week. As Jessica was talking about, there was a lot of discussion around supervised release. And I think, again, we're really looking to see how we can, you know, have discussions, particularly with community boards that are going to be most impacted around the tunes. And I do know that there have been other community boards that have expressed interest on being on the Rikers Task Force, and we hear you. And I think for us, the idea is to sort of like the L train, start small and then start to expand out. So we have not forgotten folks. And also let me know if you know, if you think that your board wants to be involved, or even if there's someone on your board that this is an issue for them that they feel passionately about, let us know so that I can, you know, just keep you in mind. I know Padmore, you all definitely said that you wanted to be involved. So, you know, we'll just be keeping folks updated. And something that we can also do, at least from some of the notes and stuff that we have, we can also make sure to distribute just to keep people looped in.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I mean, we definitely would like to be on there because we're taking some very specific things. I see how we, you know, how we can move on. But at least to be able to get, and I don't know what the format will be, regular updates and how things are moving. And I also, whether or not, because we know, at least I know, that there is also a mayor's task force that is, you know, somewhere tasked to do some, I don't know if it's the same thing, I don't know what's going on. I know it's design and support.
Jessica, did you want to?
So, I mean, the mayor's doing a sort of process. They hired a firm and they're doing this process of going to communities, doing a few community engagement sessions and then coming up with recommendations. So we're trying very hard to coordinate the Manhattan piece of that so we don't have two competing things going on. So, and it's starting to work well. It took us a minute. So they're gonna be doing some sessions in June that are particularly around what the new spaces should look like. So in Manhattan, you know, the Tombs, what is it going to be torn down and rebuilt, renovated, and if so, like what are some of the design concepts? What are the things? You know, what's the situation with the Chinatown community and how it impacts? So they're going to do some of those specifically in June. We're meeting again in July, and the mayor's folks are going to be part of that meeting. And our you know, we sort of divide into two. One is the piece around reducing the Rikers population, which I think that we do want to expand to other, you know, to other boards. And then there's a piece specifically around facility here in Lower Manhattan, and that's going to be more specific to people in the neighborhood. So, so we'll get minutes out, and we can, you know, happy to share the minutes of the last meeting with all the boards, and then sort of have conversations with you about ways that you can plug in and be involved. But we are very much starting to work with the mayor's office on a combined process.
And I know when I was at CB11 this week, they also talked about wanting to see the list of participants, meeting participants. So that is something that we can also share, because there was concern that even if they're not at the table, that some of the organizations uptown that are doing this work are at least represented or at least know about it. So we're hearing you loud and clear, and I can make sure to share that information. A couple of events. Our iftar dinner will be breaking the fast from Ramadan, which started this week. So I will have more information on our iftar dinner, but I'm really excited about it. One of our new liaisons, Afraz Khan, was the president of the Muslim Student Association at NYU before he came to us. He was a student. But he's been just doing a lot of work mobilizing with young Muslims. And so I'm excited about what our program is going to look like this year. I think every year we try to do something really unique. Aisha Irfan, who was with our office, also really infused it with a lot of spontaneity and youthfulness. And so I'm excited about that, and I think Afraz is going to bring sort of a different spin. He currently preaches on Fridays at NYU and at other mosques around the city, in addition to being a liaison, which is really awesome. And he's really talented. We're really lucky to have him. So I'm excited to see what he's going to bring to Iftar this year. And then on May 29th, we are going to be honoring Asian activists. And, you know, these are folks both politically, grassroots community, that have been doing a lot of work on issues impacting the Asian community, Asian Pacific Islander community here in New York City. And so very similar to how we did for Black History Month, where we like to honor activists, there are a ton of Asian activists here in Manhattan that have been doing really substantial good work, and so we want to honor them and raise them up. And so a location is still to be determined, but as soon as we have that, we will certainly share. And then we also will be doing a charter revision town hall. The date is sort of up in the air right now. We are working alongside Comptroller Stringer as well as Public Advocate James to come up with a good date and location for that. But that is also something that will be happening this summer. And then in addition, we'll be doing parades and all the different types of things that our office does every summer. So please be on the lookout for that. And then also, Jessica, we are doing the flyers for summer meal programs again this year.
We're not sure. So, you know, we've been really active in publicizing sites and locations for summer meals in the past. We were able to pass legislation this past year that actually requires that the city produce the list and notify schools by June 1st. Because, you know, if you do that, you can actually catch kids while they're still in school and get parents. So we're going to see, we're sort of on standby. We're hoping the city does what it needs to do to get the word out, but assuming that they won't, then yes, we'll be doing our day of action, and then we'll have the flyers again.
Yes, so we'll also be sure to plug you all into that. So we are going to start with with community board reports. I'm going to start with one. Can we just limit them to 3 items if we can?
How about I do one item?
I mean, you have 2 more you can do.
I'll take Anthony's other 2.
We can share.
You're swapping. Good. So, good morning, everyone. So I have to leave a little earlier, which is why I wanted to go first. I mentioned last month that we had our urban fellows prepare a report. Actually, 2 parts. They did an analysis of all of the development in CB1, both new buildings and conversions of existing buildings. And from that, we're able to determine the trends and the actual population and the number of buildings. And then they studied what an impact fee might be and compared that to what other cities have done. So we presented that report at our full board meeting. I'm going to make it available to all of you. I'll send it electronically. And I made the offer to Lucille that I can have one of our team, one of our staff, Diana, who heads up our, she's an urban planner, and she can present it at a Borough board. It's not a final thing, but it gets the conversation going. Okay, so that's the one thing. I'll sneak in one other. Last year when I first came in, we had been, our committee structure was geographically based. I changed that. I was surprised I didn't get assassinated. It's 1 year later, and what we've done now is we redid the survey again, because the changes I made were based on a survey with every member. They gave us their feedback. 1 year later, we asked them to give us more feedback. Surprisingly, I didn't get assassinated again. So it's been a great process of letting people understand what committees work, what don't, what agendas or what topics are we missing. I can share that information with you. We did a survey monthly.
Can you share the survey?
Surprisingly, almost 80% said they're happier now with the subject matter expert. Some of them said, oh no, we should have the geographic committees. However, keep the youth and education, keep landmarks, keep,
All the others.
yeah, it wound up being 5 of the 8 committees. So, and one of them, the best comment I get was, we had the old system for 30 years, we've only had this for 1 year, don't touch it again. Let's see what happens. Because everybody wants to fix things. But it was a good experience to have people talk about what they're involved in. Why did you join the board? And are you actually working on that now? So, you don't have my third one.
So just as a quick show of hands, I know that other community boards have had urban fellows. Gail has been really interested in learning more about their work.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking either we could do sort of a, joint session of the different urban fellows. I know some of them have maybe gone back to their institutions, but if someone from the staff would maybe want to come and present on the work, would that be something folks would be interested in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Also,
Awesome.
it would be helpful, before we get our next urban fellows, to figure out ways that we can work more effectively with them. Because I think some of the boards have had better outcomes than others.
Hi, I'm Noel from Beta NYC with the Civic Innovation Fellow Program. We actually have been working with Michael Levine in regards to finding a joint opportunity to get the Urban Fellows and the Civic Innovation Fellows to present sometime in June. So we're looking in the last 2 weeks of June. We would have it as lunch here in this room. Either we can attach it to the Friday, the 29th, I believe, and have, what is that? Is that Borough Board or Service Cabinet?
Service Cabinet.
Service Cabinet. So we can either attach it and append it to the end of Service Cabinet, or we can do it as a lunch a day beforehand. So whatever works for you. We want we want the district managers to kind of like see the resources that the Urban Fellows and the Civic Innovation Fellows and the Beta NYC's work is doing with community boards. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great, but Roberta, we have Michael Levine.
I know.
And it might not be a bad idea for him to present. How does he work with the community board, decide what topics to work on, and then how to manage the urban fellows?
Because you've done a much better job with your urban fellow than we have with ours.
Thank you, but it's based on Michael and Diana.
Yeah, well,
they're urban planners.
Right, but that's, we don't have them.
Right. So they might be able to give you some insight as to how they go through the process.
And that's actually at the core of what we want to do in the presentation. We want to demonstrate the value that the Urban Fellows have been bringing to other community boards, how Michael works with the different district managers and the boards, and then we also want to showcase how we've been working and more or less show that these are options for Manhattan community boards, and you can take and pick which one you want to work with next year.
Great.
Excellent. Thanks, Noel.
I'm sorry I have to vote. Thank you.
Forgive me. CB2?
CB2, okay, so first, something that I think we share with CB3, hi David, a bit of dismay. City Planning held a hearing with less than 24 hours notice and after a major rezoning. So we had, it was on an issue that's not in CB2, but it affects CB2, and the borough president, with thanks for that, did mention the surrounding neighborhoods that would be under pressure from this one project. So we did want to speak to that neighborhood pressure, but were unable to because the short notice and the people that went had to leave because it was not heard until after 5 o'clock, and we had meetings. So I think that it's sort of important that we make sure that when there is a public hearing, that the public can be heard.
What was the hearing on?
Tech Hub, which is, I'm sure, part of CB3's report in a moment, but we'll keep it very short here. Obviously, the L train, again, shared with CB3, we're working on two fronts, not just 14th Street, but also for us, the Loop from, after it comes off Delancey and crosses Bowery, you've got Kenmare, and you've got an enormous pressure on Little Italy and Soho with very narrow streets, very limited resources. So I'm really appreciative of the fact that we're having this task force, and we will be talking more about it later. And the other thing that's unique to our board is the possibility of a hotel going up in our area, which is fine, except it's next to the Merchant's House, the unique, irreplaceable, so old that it's just holding up on its own strength of will, and having a construction site next door to it. If it shifts over a quarter of an inch or to half an inch, we expect the Merchant's House is likely no more, or at least offline for a significant amount of time. And when you're talking about the original plaster from the original Treadwell house, you're talking about you can repair something, but then it loses its historic fabric. And lastly, I was very curious if I could just take a quick poll of how many boards weighed in on Councilmember Cabrera's initiative to increase community board budgets. I know at least 2 did. I think 11 and 5, 6, 4. Yeah, I'm in the middle of writing a letter. I just wanted to know if I could, crib.
Okay.
I mean, we've actually written our first draft, but I want to make sure we don't miss anything important, because this is, as to Roberta's earlier point, we do a lot with very little.
Thank you, Terry. CB3.
Yeah, hi, I'm David Ford. I'm the first vice chair of Community Board 3. Due to work issues, our illustrious chair could not be here today. We are on June 10th, and Lucille, we hope that you and the files can join us. We're having a new member gathering it's a Sunday at 3 p.m. in the Community Board office. Every year, we have a small reception, sort of potluck thing for new Community Board members to make them feel welcome. And we're very excited about the email yesterday and the new people coming on. Secondly, we are working on the criteria for donations. We have a lot of filming going on in the district, and sometimes different entities, whether it's Basketball City or the people that were making Russian dolls, will approach us and say, we want to give donations to the community. We're not going to facilitate the donations, we're just going to provide introductions. But one of the things we wanted to ensure is sometimes you have smaller nonprofits in the district that are less known than some of the major organizations. So we want to make sure if a film company or another entity is coming to us that we have a criteria of identifying some of the community needs. It might be a bail situation that somebody needs funding for, or an organization is going to get involved in. So we are setting up that criteria, and Alicia will make sure that she shares that information with her fellow chairs. Lastly, yesterday evening we had a transportation committee visioning workshop about the L train shutdown. The Lower East Side Partnership, which is our local bid, was phenomenal in helping. They drew up, and Lucille, if you want, I can leave this stuff with the office.
That'd be fabulous.
They drew up some tremendous resources. As everyone probably well knows, we have like at least 10 construction projects going on right off of the Williamsburg Bridge when you come off of Delancey. So we gave community members an opportunity. We put some very large maps that they drew on the tables, and people were able to actually draw on the maps. They made up some stickers, things that say like no left turn, no standing, where a traffic light should be, and it explains all the variations. So most of the people that attended were either community leadership or senior citizens, but people were able to actually have some input on what's going on with the construction projects and how they feel the traffic patterns of some of the changes should be made. We're going to compile that information and try to draft a resolution coming out of Board 3, and of course have some participation in the task force here, so thank you. And I have these resources, and I'll leave this kit with the board that they were very proud to send in.
Thank you.
And actually pass the kit around to you, and then people can get a look at it.
Okay, yes, please.
Big map.
CB4, Bert.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Continuing themes, just 2 items, I only picked 2. One, in terms of the Urban Fellow, who's not with us anymore, we used her There's a community group called South Hell's Kitchen that's working on a plan to redevelop the areas to the south of the bus terminal. And we sort of loaned the Urban Fellow to them, I guess that's the word, or spot check their work. And, to identify, yes, this is zoned for that, but then checking, no, this is the zoning, and identifying sites for housing, sites for parks. Very good use of the Urban Fellow in that. And the South Hell's Kitchen Community Coalition adopted the plan, presented it conceptually to the community board, and we have not accepted any details yet, but conceptually said, sounds great, give us more information as you go along, and then we'll see what happens. This is in conjunction with the redevelopment, reconstruction, rebuilding of the Port Authority bus terminal. And we're becoming like tour guides. We've developed this tour for the area around south of the bus station. We took some of the reps of the electeds on this tour. Eye-opening. Oh, is that where the Jitneys park? Oh, and these are the buses. Oh, look at them, backed up. Oh, and they're parked here, and the exhaust are coming in. Da 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 da. It's always good to have people see on the ground rather than give them a written presentation. It's visceral, and in a lot of ways they inhale the fumes. Or they almost get killed by a bus crossing 9th Avenue. Okay, so that was good. Fortunately, we had with city planning, we did have more than 24-hour notice on this item. And then yesterday we testified at City Council. This is what we call our Block 675, which is 11th Avenue to 12th. 29th to 30th Streets, complex of two different developers. And what we presented, and we have this tag team. We had 5 people, 2 from land use, 1 from parks, 1 specifically cross committee, and another one on the transfer of development rights. Because that's one of the issues involved here. Transfer of development rights from the Chelsea Piers to these developers so they can build higher, and then the money goes back to the park. And we have a whole priority of what should be finished in the park. So the format we've developed comes out of our liquor license committee. We deny unless these stipulations are made, which we find very helpful. In liquor license, they sign off with the stipulations. This is a little different. This is City Council. We're really in favor, but we're denying it unless we also get these items. And one of the items was both buildings, one was 65%, one was 67% of the floors. In other words, if it was 100 floors, the first 67 floors would be mixed affordable housing, and leaving just the top floors with the high views for the complete market rates. The money.
How do you do that?
How do you do that? By negotiation.
No, there's also get them to show up. I'm sorry to hijack, but
they need from us. They need something. They needed the development rights. They needed changes in the zoning, even of a tweak. You got some leverage. We don't have that. So one of the things we said, that's very nice, but we're for more integration, and we use that word, economic, racial, ethnic integration, and we want 85% of the floors. Okay, and of course, when we talk about that, it's not just 3 apartments at one end, 7 apartments at the other.
And a corridor.
It's completely right through and through. And the same bathrooms, same kitchens, etc., etc. That was one of the main items. Second on that was, we think it's too low a cost. We've been hacking away at this. The purchase of the development rights from the Chelsea Piers was fixed at, I think it was $300, which is the lowest any community board 2 with the Pier 40 was higher.
EDC set the number?
Yeah. and with the Hudson River Park Trust. You know, they're happy to get money, whatever it's at. And so will we, but we'd like more. Right? So we cited other development, transfer development rights, and we questioned the methodology. You know, that's how you do it. And the third item that we said was, you know, the big deal on the emergency, the ambulance station, which we're moving from 23rd Street. The permanent site will be here. The hitch is, the permanent site for the ambulance is where the Gateway Tunnel will be. Not the tunnel entrance, but the construction. They're going to park the vehicles there. They're going to dig borings there, so that the permanent site won't be available, God knows, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. Is that wood? Is this wood? Okay.
So it's a laminate.
We have a temporary site. We've been working out with the Port Authority of a temporary site in the West 40s, conceptually. We don't have the exact site yet. There's possibilities. We still have to talk with fire department, and et cetera, et cetera. But we asked that the city take possession of the site now, so we know it will be, rather than we're going to temporary, and the people up there will say, how do we know it's temporary? You don't have the site to the south yet, the permanent one. So we want to, because that would also facilitate the acceptance of the temporary site if they knew there was a permanent purchase. And I didn't testify. We got coordinated and who's going first. And I, as the chair, I felt, I don't know if that's the right word, proud. We were really good.
Good.
We were really good. Okay.
Thank you, Bert.
Thanks.
CB5.
All right. So Leila Logisiko stepping in for Vicky Barbera, who unfortunately was unable to join the meeting today. But she gave me very thorough notes. We did receive the new members to Community Board 5. We're very excited. Vicky did a mini orientation right before our full board meeting last week. We do realize that we are going to need to do a much thorough orientation, which will probably happen in September. It is worth noting that in the past 5 years, we have had 35 new members appointed to Community Board 5. The turnover is just so enormous that keeping members up to speed on the goals, the missions, the roles of the community board are very, very important. The main concerns are with attendance, attitude, resolution writing, team players, and the importance of voting. Lots of new members feel that if they're not totally educated on an issue, they will revert to abstaining, while an abstention is actually a silent no, and it's very, very problematic. This is how you get motions to fail. And when you have, like 9 new members, which is what we're getting this year, if they all abstain, you will fail resolutions. And this is very problematic. So Vicky is very conscious of this issue and trying to address it. And then the second issue that she wanted me to bring to your attention is the issue with the Landmarks Preservation Commission chair. And the appointment of a new chair. We actually were fortunate to send a letter to the editor to Cranes, who decided to publish it. CB5 is on record asking for the repeal of the proposed rules, and we're hoping that the new chair will actually go along with that. We don't have certainty that the new chair would not embrace these proposed rules changes. CB5 is absolutely dead set against them, and we feel that it's a very, very bad way to handle applications to LPC by letting the staff decide on what is appropriate or not. We have undertaken a survey of the number of applications that we received in the past 12 years. We empirically have felt that we are receiving much less than we used to, and we want to know if in fact it is the case. I remember when I started on the board, which was like 15 years ago, we would on average have between 5 and 10 applications for landmarks. Last month we had one. The month before we canceled our meeting. It had never happened, ever. We have 2 historic districts, we have God knows how many individual landmarks. I mean, you name it, they're in CB5, Empire State Building, you know, but we're not seeing them. And it's not like they're not doing any work, and you know, it's like construction everywhere. We see the DOB permits, so work is being done, and they're not coming to, you know, they're not subjected to a public review. So we want to better understand the decrease in number of applications. So we're reviewing that. We would love to hear if there is similar experience in other community boards. We don't know if it's specific to CB5 or is it a Manhattan issue. We'd love to hear what's happening in other boroughs too, but definitely want to bring that to the attention of this group. If you guys have any insights on the trend in applications, that would be very helpful. Now, in terms of applications, we did review one particular application that was that generated quite a bit of discussion. The New York Bomb Squad, which is currently located in CB2, is actually proposing to move to CB5. The NYPD has the plan to purchase a building on 26th Street, which is currently a parking garage, and they are going to convert this parking garage into the new bomb squad. There was a number of issues that were raised in terms of, by residents of 26th Street, in terms of noise. You know, does it mean that the sirens go off, you know, like 10 times per day when the vehicles exit the bomb squad? What type of response, what type of impact to the traffic? We were actually very surprised to hear that there is only one bomb squad in the entire city. So that's it. And they serve the 5 boroughs. The rationale for choosing 26th Street, according to the head of the bomb squad, who came and gave us a very thorough and very good presentation, is that it really is equidistant between downtown and midtown, where they have high priority sites. They explained to us that they have abilities to have a switch to basically change the light, the traffic light patterns, so that they would basically be able to block the traffic on 26th Street so that they can get their vehicles to exit, while 6th Avenue and 7th Avenue, is it between 7 and 8, or 6 and 7?
7 and 8.
Between 7 and 8. They would basically be able to block the traffic on the avenue so that their vehicles could exit. They were not through really any application process with DOT and had not really been given the green light to actually do that. So it was theoretical, and we were told that it has been done, but that maybe the fire department has that ability. So we ended up denying the application unless a number of conditions were met. We feel, you know, similarly to what you did and what our legal license Public Safety and Quality of Life Committee does. Denying unless is actually a stronger way to get those conditions met. We asked that a traffic study be done, which has not been done yet, although this is part of an early process because it's a capital expenditure for a city agency, so they have to go through this environmental review. Overall, Community Board 5 is in favor of having the bomb squad on 26th Street. We just want to make sure that all these issues have been addressed before we see neighbors going crazy because, you know, traffic becomes even more congested, or that, you know, noise it becomes such an issue. So that was our report for CB5.
I just want to thank you because that's the boundary. You're the-
Yes,
You're the north side of the street, we're the
Yeah.
south side of the
Yeah.
street.
yeah.
We had the same presentation, but we don't have to vote on it. They just did it as a courtesy,
Yeah.
because you're the people who have to vote on it. Sounds like you did it really well, thank you.
And if
Yeah,
I may,
thank you.
I may suggest CB2 would be happy to share its experience of having the bomb squad on a narrow residential street.
Yeah.
So maybe we can share, at least our district manager can give some insights.
Yes, I think that would be very, very helpful because we also understand that, it's not a matter of approving or denying and then forgetting about it. It's going to be an ongoing process of, welcoming them as a neighbor and they're there to stay and make sure that we're able to mitigate the,
So we may have some experience that could be helpful.
Yeah.
We'd be happy to
although
share.
our understanding is that they co-locate with the sixth precinct,
yes.
and therefore the dynamic is going to change slightly
And
because.
Brett, I don't want to get into detail now, but if we can be of help, we're happy to
Thank
do
you so much. Wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you. CB6.
Hi, everyone. I'm Asya Badi. I'm second vice chair of CB6. Molly, as you saw, had to leave for work purposes. So we, along with everybody else, are very excited with all of our new members, and we started a training, part 1 of 3 last night with our new members. So I think it's really great and it's important, and it does support a lot of their growth and comfortableness with resolutions and other pieces. So a couple of points that Molly left was the East River Greenway improvements are moving forward with ongoing community meetings. EDC is planning an esplanade around the East 50s as well as below along 36th to 41st Street. And then in addition, the East Side Coastal Resilience Project is moving on into ULIRP this summer, and CB6 is working with CB3 to be sure we advocate for the best outcomes to protect and strengthen the waterfront, and that is up to 24th Street for us. And finally, there is a new shelter called Safe Haven on 17th Street that is opened in May with 24 residents. They had their first CAB meeting on Tuesday night, which we attended. So they seem to have, worked really well, and they're working on sort of really working with the community and the community concerns. That's it. Everything else everyone will mention.
Thank you. CB7.
I'll help Padmore out here. I'll take one of your points. We had a joint task force, our NYCHA task force and CB9. We had our second forum in April. We're having our next forum, which will be on security. We've split, so we've had 4 forums. 2 have been in CB7, 2 have been in CB9. The attendance has been more based on where we've held the meeting, so it's been more of the people that live in that particular public housing, although there have been people from both, and it's I think they've been very helpful. We've gotten good representatives from NYCHA. People have gotten, I don't know that they've responded to general complaints, but they've responded to individual complaints. We got our new members. We've had 1 session with them to introduce them. Our new members handbook is finished. It's not on the web, but I can send it around. On the 29th, we're having a professor from McGill University talk about Airbnb. McGill did the study, I believe, with NYU, and Scott Stringer used part of the study in his report. So our new housing chair called this professor at McGill and asked him if he could recommend somebody in New York. And he said, well, he was actually going to be in New York on the 29th. Awesome. Could we change our housing meeting? So I will send, Lucille, can I send it to you?
Absolutely.
And then okay. Because they've done the study in all of New York, and we'd love people from the other boards to come. And that's. Oh, and yesterday we walked on Broadway with DOT. We're looking to make Broadway a friendlier, more fun, more engaging street, much the way it used to be when it was really a boulevard, a grand boulevard. We'd like to make it a grand boulevard again.
Wonderful, thank you. CB8.
Okay, affordable housing is a big thing, and combines with zoning. Exdel has made clear its intention to knock down an entire block of the walk-up buildings from 79th to 80th on First Avenue. We don't know what happened to the tenants, they've never come to the board. There's no zoning on that street, so they don't have to come to the board. Everything in the eyes of these builders is as of right on 3rd, 2nd, 1st, and York, and it presents a big problem for the community board, which is why we can't ask them to do anything, because they don't even want to show up. And when they show up, they don't have any information. Every answer is kind of, well, we don't know, or it's a lot of words without saying anything, or they just don't come, or they send people who have no knowledge, no information. We ask them to come back with a list of questions, and it's just over and over again. So we're concerned about what happened to those people in those buildings. We're concerned about the infill project, again, still rather, on the Holmes Towers, because the city wants it to be 50-50 market rate affordable housing. We think it should be all affordable housing. Asphalt Green gets space there. We think, how can the people afford Asphalt Green? They're taking away a playground. The whole thing just seems really unfair and is leading to a lot of tension and a lot of concern. And so the affordable housing and the development and the tricks that builders play, I know there's an effort in the city council to close some of the loopholes in the zoning rules. That building with the empty 12 floors in the middle is in our community, and that was just approved. And they want to, there's another builder that wants to cantilever over the shorter buildings on 3rd Avenue. So we're kind of agitated about that. The new members started. I set up a mentoring program, and I paired an experienced board member with a new board member recently appointed to help the new members acclimate. And I talked to them about the voting and the abstention. The Frick came last night to present for its intended expansion, and I have to say that of the 5 new members that were at the meeting last night, they all voted. So the abstention came from board members, or one board member. Anyway, so that's our update. If anyone has any advice on these zoning issues, we just can't get the city to be responsive to our concerns.
Thank you. I will just say, because I'm hearing boards talk about some of their new member practices, if you would like to share those with us, I think that would be really helpful to learn about sort of how boards do stuff. I always use 6 as an example because of Claude, but I love this idea of the mentoring program. I know that
we do that too.
Yes, yeah. And you all do that.
We did that with our junior members.
3 does.
Yes, and I do know for particularly the boards that have young people that we've placed on there, that's been a really, really helpful tool to sort of place a member next to them that either like has a teenager around their same age or at least has an understanding of how to communicate with them. And I think just for the first couple of months to give them some help with some of the new terminology and all of that. But we all could use that, not just our young people. So please send to me all of your best practices for what you all have done, and I can compile them and make sure that everyone can see them. Okay? CB9?
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you.
You got 1 minute.
Wow. That's for taking everyone.
I know.
All right, I'll be quick. Well, we're going to have a very interesting meeting tonight. First and foremost, the new members are going to be coming in for the first time, introducing them and actually I like their mentoring idea, so we're going to see how that could work out. But one of the agenda items on the meeting tonight is the potential standing up of a methadone clinic in the neighborhood. It has come before the health committee. There was a debate there. It came out of the health committee. We're supposed to vote on it tonight. I'm not sure if I might do that just because I think it might be best for the new members to get a little bit more information. But we'll see. But there have been, so last week we invited the group Argos Communities and members of the 147th Street Block Association. And we encouraged them to talk because apparently the Block Association never knew anything about this. And there have been some incidents that have happened on the block, and the Argos Communities and another outstanding service center have not been told of some of the issues that have been happening. So we encouraged the two parties to talk. They had a meeting on Tuesday. From what I understood, it was not necessarily a disrespectful meeting, it was very definitely a heated meeting. We expect some of that today. But the last meeting, it was very respectful, and we expect that to happen again. I think, you know, many of the board members are seeing the two sides of this, being able to provide a service like this in the community, ensuring that those who need the help can get access to the help, but at the same time, it's such a close proximity to, you know, like residential area families. So it's definitely going to take a lot in terms of trying to.
Is there any idea of sort of creating like a regular mechanism for them to communicate with each other?
So that's one of the things that we have definitely
Yeah.
asked them to do, just to make sure that they're always in communication.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that'll be very helpful. So we'll see how the meeting goes, and we'll update everyone about that. The other thing that's coming up is, so we've been on Columbia in terms of all the buildings up there we're putting up in West Harlem. Now we're looking at it from the environmental health and the in terms around the construction. We've been trying to get some information from Columbia about what are some of the potential trouble around, you know, pollution that's coming from the construction area. They've been rather slow in getting us the information.
Oh, really?
Yes.
We did a forum on asthma last year. Rebecca Seawright did a study on it, especially around the East Harlem and border. So maybe you want to get in touch with that office, and they might be able to give you some
Sure,
information.
please, if you can send me the information.
Sure.
Thank you. So we, so we've been following up on them. Our chair of the health committee has been in contact with them. So is our strategic committee, which kind of overlooks the funding that we have brought into the community benefits agreement. So we will be constantly badgering them to try and get updates about what's happening. And I understand that they're changing the number of buildings now that are supposed to be going up. So we have a great deal of concern around that. And then the final item, well, penultimate item.
Yeah.
773 St. Nicholas, this is the building on 149th Street that was burned where the fireman passed away, unfortunately. So I spoke to the owner last week. There is a story out in the New York One that indicates the cause of the fire, and I asked him if it's true. He said yes, he'll go by that. Apparently there was some problem with the boiler, and there were flammable materials. From my understanding, the flammable materials were placed there because of the movie that they were shooting in there. So that was a few things that happened there. And I understand he also has a couple of residents that have a lawsuit out against him and the movie company. So there's limited things that he can say in regards to what caused and you know where he stands and everything. Nonetheless, he's trying to raise the building back and as much as possible keep the facade, because it is a landmark block. So we'll be working with him to be able, and of course to provide affordable housing in the space. So we'll be working with him on that. Last thing, out of the 100 interns, is it possible for us to get one or two?
So we have been in discussion with your folks around having an intern, and I know that space has been a particular issue, which is why we've been told to not. But we can talk offline about ways to accommodate. Yeah. But yes, we are, you know, every year we always get like 100 or so interns, and the plan is that a few will be assigned to community affairs. So they will be working alongside the liaisons, but we can certainly see if we can at least help connect you all with some.
Thank
you. CB10 or
question. Was it the flammable materials placed there by the landlord or the production company?
We understand by the production company.
That's awesome.
All right, that's upsetting. Thank you.
CB10.
Good morning, I'm John Lynch, First Vice Chair, representing our Chair Cicely Harris. Quickly piggyback off the tragedy in St. Nick's, which also destroyed what was the former St. Nick's Jazz Club of Lahr. And when we did a joint letter with CB9, a condolence to the fallen firefighter's family. But we've had a lot of issues, a lot of concerns raised about filming projects in our community. Obviously, there's a lot of historic neighborhoods in Harlem, and they'd like to come up and do a lot of filming. And so we've arranged, we haven't gotten a date yet to have a meeting with the the mayor's office.
Oh, we'd love to.
Yes, we will bring, yeah, they're gonna come to us, and now they want us to come to them, but, because this was something that's been, boiling over to begin with.
Yeah.
We want to sit down and work out agreements, community benefit agreements, and the like. So just to finish up that was his point, not mine. So, anyway, what did we do? We had a great forum last week that was sponsored by our Arts and Culture Committee and co-sponsored with the Harlem Arts Alliance. It was called Deconstructing Black Theaters, basically about the state of the Black theater world, which of course is centered up in Harlem. We had 5 panelists, several old timers. I mean, the stories, the history that these folks have, and a very dynamic, relatively newcomer from the Black Theater of National Black Theater. And you would think this would be sort of like a nice feel-good forum, but they're under such stress. There were so many issues facing them, and it actually became somewhat contentious. We had a full house with the community, people asking, well, what are you doing for young people, for interns, people who want to, learn about theater, want to learn about the craft of, stagehands and all of that. And it was very, it was almost like a community board meeting. And the people on the stage said, hey, look, you're preaching to the choir, obviously, but, we are providing, internships and training for young people, but, to almost use a direct quote, you guys have to put your butts in our seats in order for this to thrive. But they talked about the problems of not having real estate, budgets, obviously, the problems of grant writing to get money. There were, downtown theaters have literally $1 million grant writing budgets. They spend $1 million just to get the money. And other smaller groups are faced with, 50 and 60 page applications and no staff. One of the bottom line takeaways is that you need like a 600 seat theater. You need, you don't need 1,000 seats. You need a 600 seat theater to viably be able to put on these productions. Gail Brewer showed up. She came in after the panel had begun, and we were like, "There's no, we cannot stop this panel, now." So we texted Athena, said, could she do closing remarks, which she did. And it was great because after then having heard everything, she was able to really kind of say, yeah, well, we can try to do this and try to do that. So that was a great event. We've had some discussions on 2 issues with the MTA. So they have recently closed. That's going to be for like a 5 or 6 month period. The B and C station on 110th Street and Frederick Douglass Circle. We found out about it roughly the Tuesday before the Monday closing. Our district kind of goes to the corner of that corner, and they said, "Oh, we didn't realize that it was in your district." So someone came to, like the next day, came to a general board meeting. That was an S show, to put it mildly. We then rallied. Gail Brewer jumped on it as soon as she heard about it. So we had a meeting set up, a open public meeting on about 2 days' notice, which was a really good meeting. And again, Gail was great. She participated heavily. We had people from the MTA there. There was a lot of back and forth, ill will and back and forth. We did get. There were no shuttle buses being run. They're also going to be closing 86th Street and 72nd Street shortly. No shuttle buses. They did agree to run more M10 buses along 8th Avenue. But we were talking to them about, can you reopen an exit at that station that was closed years ago? Can you make it handicapped accessible? While you're down there. A lot of pushback. A lot of nastiness, actually. We've also been talking to the MTA, although it's their construction consultants, about the upcoming second phase of the 2nd Avenue subway, which of course primarily impacts 11. It's going to connect from 96th Street up to the Lexington Avenue subway at 125th Street, and then right next to the MTA Metro North station on Park and 125th. So, but even though the terminus is, the last station is technically at Lexington Avenue, the butt of the rails will go all the way to Lenox Avenue, which is roughly 6th Avenue, in our district. So we will be getting, some of the construction issues. They'll have to condemn at least 2 lots to build the air shafts. So we've been having, that's been a much, better conversation, a more transparent conversation with them. And we're going to be continuing with that, and we had a public forum about that as well. And lastly, we have a great event coming up on June 2nd, Harlem Peace Fair. It's going to be a block fair on 139th Street. We're working closely with a great organization up our way called Street Corner Resources. June happens to be Anti-Gun Violence Month. So the Harlem Peace Fair is going to be kind of focused on anti-gun violence, but we're also going to, bring in folks to talk about domestic violence, bullying. We're going to have a lot of organizations represented at tables. We're going to have events for children. We're going to have all kinds of cultural things going on. But we're really trying to give a lot of information about, voter registration. I'm clearly going to be in touch with the Brooklyn Community Bail Fund to see if they can send someone information about, I'll be doing a presentation about formerly incarcerated, voting rights, certificates of relief and things of that nature. We'll have the faith-based organizations there, of course. So pray for good weather. Hopefully we'll have a really great event on June 6th. So. We have a bunch of other stuff, but those are my 3
I do hope
points.
that MTA came back to talk about the 145th Street station closure.
They are coming back to talk about
Okay.
that as well. Yeah,
Wonderful.
I think that's on the schedule.
Okay.
Yes.
145th and Lennox?
145th.
The 3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That station will be closed for about 5 months, starting in July,
Yeah.
28th this summer.
So the both lines went out.
Yeah, so it would be, but I think it's just the station itself. But that does have a lot of impacts because it's a yard. And so because it's a yard, it will have impacts in terms of, how many trains are coming out, where are they starting and ending. So, I'm glad that they're coming back.
Yeah.
CB11.
Thank you, Lucille. Nilsa couldn't be here today, so I'm standing in. My name is Xavier Santiago. I'm the Vice Chair of Community Board 11. Real quick aside for 9 and 10, I work as a producer of film and television. So whenever I hear there are safety issues, I get very, it's very disconcerting and upsetting when accidents that are preventable happen. So any way I can be of service to you, we could collaborate because we are having more filming coming in.
Yeah.
And I've actually shot on our streets, been able to do, on whether it's a $1 million plus or a micro budget, been able to do things safely. So this is very important, but it's also a source of income for our community. So afterwards, if we could speak. Real quick, I've sent around, not sure if you've gotten any notes from Nilsa. We've had a lot of events, been very busy. We had the Harlem's Girls Empowerment Zone. We had the Opioid Crisis, sponsored by the Metropolitan Hospital. Spirited Service Festival, Town Hall Visioning for the 125th Street Metro Hub, East Harlem Neighborhood Health Action Center. I can go on further. We had a very successful Eat Local East Harlem. That was great. It was a lot well attended. We're also continuing with our local precincts to build the block, better relations with our officers who serve our communities. Again, we've already mentioned the 2nd Avenue MTA continues. It's community outreach, and we'll be all working collaboratively together on that. A couple things of note. Thank you, Lucille, for being there and presenting after losing our liaison. She will be missed. We have begun our training. We will be doing the same thing with mentorship. I'm mentoring a couple people already. We had our first, I think we have 8 or 9 new members, and we actually did have a resolution that was presented by Youth and Education, which I will address in just a moment. Nilsa couldn't speak. She asked me to chair, and I kind of gave a brain dump Robert's Rules of Order of how we proceed, how we go from the global motion to an amendment, voting, and et cetera, and so on, and they just picked it up very easily. Thank you again for our teenager that you've appointed. I just want to give a little shout out because she walked Francis Mastrota home.
She's a sweetheart.
Yeah,
I love her.
I'm trying to, her name escapes me in the moment, but
Jada,
yeah. She was fantastic, and just getting stuck right in, and just the etiquette that's what we need more of. So that was very.
And then they go away to college.
Yes, right.
But Jada's actually staying here,
she's
and
staying
that's
local.
particularly
She's
why
going to college
we
in the
appointed
city.
her.
Yeah. So thank you. Good find. I did attend the CB7, CB9 last forum for NYCHA, and yeah, so it was good to have that information. We are working avidly with the 4 public sites within our district for including a multi-service center for affordable housing. We did a walkthrough recently. Next month, in June, we had with our land use a presentation, but we will be having a public hearing for a city planning commission special permit with the proposed text amendment to M1 districts for new hotels. That's important for everyone here at this table, because if you have an M1 district, it's one of these issues that are going to come up again and again. And just like what you were dealing with in the Upper East Side and other areas, there are antiquated zoning provisions that need to be addressed, such as R72s, which now brings me to the resolution that was passed with Children's Aid Society. This has been an ongoing issue, and we appreciate Gail's work and liaising and trying to get us to come together. They have sold, for those who are not aware, lots, I believe, 58 and 59, which are the outdoor basketball court and picnic area. It's about 100 by 45 feet or something like that. That is an R72, which means that they can break the plane of the sky if they put in such as a community service center or some kind of community resource. The lot next door, which is the church there, has a memorandum of contract. We are investigating who owns that, but typically when you deal with development, as you've noticed, they do LLCs that shell and shell and shell, and it's the Russian doll scheme. Legal, normal, but that is, we did pass a resolution. We were resolved that the State Attorney General investigate this transaction. There are other electeds who are saying it needs to be an aggregate, because they had community centers that were sold in Staten Island, the East Village, and others over the past three years. Yet they bought a $45 million new corporate headquarters.
Children's Aid sold several
community
centers
yes,
around it. Oh.
And are complaining that they don't have enough money, but then
Bought this new, or developed this new.
Condo building with offices in it for $45 million.
For just corporate, no services.
Yeah, no, just corporate, no services.
Just their corporate office.
And they sold at the Charities building their portion for 35.1. We've tried to engage the CEO and president. They said we had a community visioning that happened on May 12th, Mother's Day weekend. That was a Saturday. Nilsa and several other community board members attended. I was tending to my grandmother, broke her death, and my mother, so. But we are resolved that we asked the State Attorney General to investigate it, Manhattan Borough President and New York City Council to act in solidarity with the community and to find a way to make a new arrangement, if possible, and to urge Children's Aid Society to have a CB11 representative designated in an advisory role for our steering committee. We'll have this, Angel is putting in the edits, but that is something that we are keeping our eyes on, and I think it's very important to that community. And on a personal note, and the reason I have a dog in a fight, but I don't have a dog in a fight. I have kids, but I've known a lot of the people and gotten to know a lot of the people on that block, because many of the people that live there, when it had been active as a community center for 50, 60 years, they're now grandparents, they volunteered there. And a lot of those families and their kids that are still going there, I've had to sit on the stoops and listen to them and wipe tears away. So I think this is something, and for historical context of New York City, the parents and grandparents there, back during the horrible times of Spanish Harlem, during the drug dealing, the fathers would chase away the drug dealers who would try to come on that block with bats. And literally it's become a sanctuary because of that. So anyway, this is not to go on, but that is it. We welcome and thank you, Lucille, and for all that you do as well. So thank you, everyone. That sums it up.
All right, last but certainly not least, Shah Ali.
Okay, I have 3 quick points, and I'll make it quick. But by no means do not equate the speed of this presentation to the issues going on in CB12. But I will begin by saying that for my monthly presentation, I would ask that chairs send information to us so we can share it. And that's been happening, and it's wonderful. Because while our neighbors live in Washington Heights and Inwood, we work throughout the city, we work throughout the borough, socialize. So issues like the L train closure is something that affects us as well, although geographically we're not in that area. So please continue to do so, and I'll do so as well. We are still going through our rezoning. The board voted the way not to support. The Borough President's Office voted not to support. The Borough President's Office put on a wonderful public hearing with panels. It was it was a genius idea and way of engaging the community. and people took it away, I think, all in agreement that it was a wonderful way to get people to be heard. We testified at the City Planning Commission, and the process will move on from this point. We have two issues of real concern. The bike lanes. The bike lanes on Dykeman Street. We had a public hearing. It's become a real issue. We might be, and I'll stand corrected if I'm wrong, the first community, we passed a resolution recently at our executive committee asking DOT to revert back to the original plan, removing the bike lanes. And if that's done, I think it might be the first time, the first instance that DOT has actually done that, to take bike lanes out of community after they put them in, citywide. So that could be big, or at least precedent setting. And the third is something that has generated a lot of concern. We're still at the very beginning phase of trying to figure out how the board will handle this, but it's generating so much concern that we figured out we have to at least hold a town hall or a public hearing. That is, everyone's aware of the Safe Space initiative, where there's going to be locations throughout the county and throughout the city where drug users would be able to safely
Safe injection
sites, right, thank you for the term. And one of them is in Washington Heights, on 181st Street, in the middle of a very busy commercial corridor by schools, by residential, and it's taken upon, there are as many opinions as there are people who are in this area. So it's going to be something that we're going to develop our position on. So stay tuned on that, and I'll let everyone know. Thank you.
I know that our office has attended a few events around safe injection sites. They also had one at Marcus Garvey a while back, so it's something that we're certainly keeping abreast of. Yes.
What was the 181st Street and what?
So it's 181st Street, I believe, off of St. Nicholas Avenue.
St. Nicholas, okay.
We have one in Anderson Street also. We have one on 37th, supposed 37th Street, right at Oak Avenue. Which is mostly, it's about half hotels, and the other half, there's some residences and some, it's a very mixed block.
Yeah.
Just one footnote for the Children's Aid Society. I've gotten calls from people on the south side of the street of that block that they've been getting brokers who have someone interested in buying the residential air rights for their townhouses, the residential air rights. And given that Children's Aid has admitted they sold only half from their 58 and 59, I think 60 is the actual building. If they retain half and then sold their half from the building, that creates contiguous movement, so they can go down the line from like 126, 124, 122, and put them all together. So I just wanted to add that so everyone is aware for the land use issues.
Yeah, I was just going to say that too, up in Albany again.
Yeah, so just wanted to put that in as a
thank
you.
And maybe we might want to put a position about removing the FAR cap as a borough board item.
It's the second time this term.
That is something that we can have our land use office take a look at. So I just want to wrap it up by saying thank you all. Borough board has been really great for the last couple of months. And so I just call for an adjournment. Thank you.
So moved.
Yeah.
Abstain? No.
David's
Let
fine.
you know.
David, could I see some of
And
that?
then,
Yeah, they're over, Lucille has them. This
it's
is
just
the thing.